whether or not she has a wellness coach. Aryna Sabalenka is just in such a fantastic place. I think mentally, physically, the way she's producing a continued high level of tennis, and it's no small feat to pull off the Sunshine Double, but Sabalenka did it, capturing the title in Miami after her victory in Indian Wells. She had a big win over Elena Rybakina in the semifinals. That was a rematch of the final that we saw in Indian Wells, which was incredibly tight, 7-6 in the third. And then she gets one of her other rivals in Coco Gauff in the finals. And Gauff made a pushback. She had the crowd behind her. Of course, the American crowd supporting Coco. But Sabalenka gets through 6-2, 4-6, 6-3 to capture the title. Other than that one set here in the final, otherwise basically unscathed for the tournament, didn't drop any other sets. Sabalenka is the best player in the world, and she continues to show it.
And how rare is it for us to have a dual winner of the Sunshine Double on both the men's and the women's side, as we have this year with Jannik Sinner also accomplishing the feat for the men. So just dominance and brilliance by the two of them. Sabalenka has shown Rybakina that she is very eager and intent on keeping that number one ranking after Rybakina won the Aussie Open to start the year in terms of the major tournaments of 2026. But what Sabalenka has done here is terrific, and once again proving to the world that she is the most dominant and consistent of the female tennis players right now. I was speaking with former world number 4 Dominika Cibulkova, which I just want to throw out there is going to be our next big guest on Matchpoint Canada. And she talked to me about, just to give a little preview about how impressed she's been with Aryna Sabalenka these past couple of years and just how dominant and consistent she's been. Those two, it was interesting having Cibulkova on because she's played against most of the current players. She played twice against Sabalenka, with Aryna winning both of those in 2018 and 2019. But interesting to hear a former player's perspective and just how of all the women right now on the women's tour, that Sabalenka is the one that's really captivated her attention. Now we make the transition from hard court to clay court, which in recent years has not seemed to be that big of a transition for Sabalenka to make. And I've got no reason to believe that she's going to be slowing down whatsoever when she hits the slower surface in Europe.
No, I really don't think she's going to skip a beat. I think she's an all-surface player. She came so close to winning Roland Garros last year, and we should acknowledge just the type of history setting here. Winning the Sunshine Double, she's only the fifth woman in tennis history to do this. I mean, Steffi Graf did it in 94 and 96. Kim Clijsters did it in 2005. We had Victoria Azarenka do that in 2016. And of course, Iga Swiatek, part of her incredibly dominant run in 2022, pulled off the Sunshine Double with titles at Indian Wells and Miami. So Sabalenka entering rarefied air. And I really think, given her age, 27 years old, 11 WTA 1000 titles now that she's won, 4 majors. She is really, I think, solidifying herself as one of these all-time greats. She might not be the upper echelon like a Steffi Graf when it's all said and done, but she's kind of in that short list. I think, maybe one of the 10 best women's players in history when it's all said and done. I think that's quite possible.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm super excited to see down the road. Not that I want to rush things. I can't believe it's clay court season already, in 2026, but I am excited to see when it all plays out. Where do these women stand in the overall history and echelon of the different eras of the women's game and the sport in general? Because you've got Coco Gauff, who's 5 years younger than Sabalenka. You've got Swiatek, who's more of a peer in terms of age. And don't forget Rybakina as well, who's eager to prove that she's got more slams to win as well. So where will things all hash out eventually? And, is Sabalenka going to continue to sort of consolidate as she's done, I would say, in the last couple of years? Or is Coco going to step up and as she gets more mature and more experienced, start to take away some of those major titles as well? And we've got Iga Swiatek, who we'll talk about shortly, making a coaching change and always looking hungry to stay, on speed and up to par with those other players I just mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. And, looking at the rankings race right now, Sabalenka almost 3,000 points ahead of Elena Rybakina, who is number 2 in the world, and Coco Gauff is a little less than 900 points back of Rybakina there for that second spot. Well, Iga Swiatek has dropped back to 4th overall, which is a rare spot for her to be in. I think
Seems odd.
Yes, I think we're pretty used to her holding down 1 or 2, or at the very least 3. But I don't know if the hierarchy has changed drastically. But I look at the upcoming slams, Roland Garros, then Wimbledon, then the U.S. Open. I feel like Coco is definitely in the mix there. Can Iga Swiatek get on the right foot in time at her very best major of the season? And I sense that she realizes she has to switch things up, and she's feeling a sense of urgency to, after 18 months, fire her coach, Wim Fissette, and make a sudden change like that.
Well, clearly, I mean, look, she just won Wimbledon last year. She's less than a year removed from undoubtedly the biggest maybe surprise slam win of her career, given the fact that she was typically dominant on clay and also very strong on hard court, but had not had the same type of success at the All England Club. I mean, what player goes out and fires a coach within less than a year of winning a major title? That does not happen all that often, but she's shown before that she is willing to make changes when she feels like she's slipping. And we saw it in the fall of 2024 when she fired her coach while she was still the number 1 player in the world, which again is also pretty unheard of. I mean, think about a team sport. When would a team ever fire their head coach if they were first in whatever league they played in, right? You wouldn't see that happen. So for a player to do that is really, I gotta say, admirable, that she's not afraid to pull the trigger on something if she feels that it's going to help her to improve. And if she obviously feels like she's losing ground to some of her rivals. And, they had a great run, even though it was short, as you mentioned, just about a year and a half. They made 2 semifinals, 2 quarterfinals together, her and Wim Fissette, along with winning at Wimbledon. That's a pretty damn good track record at the majors for most players, but clearly it's not good enough for Iga, who still believes that she can get back to and be the number 1 player in the world.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? The standard is so high for Iga Swiatek, and I remember in the Netflix documentary when she was featured, and they talked with their coaching team, and this was before Wim Fissette was brought on, about their approach to every given tournament, that they're arriving on site with the expectation of coming home with the trophy. And that's an incredibly high standard to hold oneself up to. And I feel like sometimes, as great as Iga's intensity is on the court, sometimes it causes this stress and this tension. And I could see her playing with a lot of that when she lost to Alina Svitolina in Indian Wells in the quarterfinals. And that's not a bad loss. Svitolina is, as you know, having a great season. She's a great player. But obviously alarm bells were raised when she lost in the opening round to Magda Linette after winning the opening set 6-1. It felt like she was in cruise control. You figure you're getting an easy opening round victory from Iga Swiatek. And
well, especially, right? Especially when you've had 73 of them in a row up until that point.
I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, did we take her dominance for granted? Because that's an extraordinary statistic which reveals just how incredibly dominant Iga was through this long period of time. 73 straight matches, so 73 consecutive tournaments where she at the very least won the first match of that tournament.
And I wonder how much that played into the coaching change decision as well. Not that you can blame your coach for when eventually you're going to lose in an opening round of some tournament. It's not going to last forever. But I just wonder what the mindset would have been, what the thought process was after that loss. Did she consider maybe making that switch right then and there? Clearly, she was probably thinking about it already at that point in time. I'd be really curious to see how that works in the mind of a champion like hers. And just for a second to talk about Wim Fissette, he's going to bounce back super quick. I expect he'll be hired real quick. Someone, for sure, I forget who it was, who was like, well, he'll have a job by either the French Open or Wimbledon again if he certainly wants it. He's only 46 years old, which is remarkable because it feels like he's been around forever. And he's already established as such a high impact coach, one of the greats of this generation for sure. When you see some of the champions he's worked with, like Kim Clijsters, Simona Halep, Angie Kerber, Naomi Osaka twice, Victoria Azarenka, just to mention some of the bigger ones of recent years. And then you look at a couple of the ones that maybe we don't hold in the same esteem, but he pulled the best results I think he could have out of them. Like, for example, Sabine Lisicki, who made the finals, never won a slam, but had arguably, without a doubt, the greatest result of her career by making the finals of Wimbledon while working with Wim Fissette, as well as Joanna Konta, who made the semifinals of Wimbledon, and the enormous pressure there for her as a British tennis player while working with Wim. So his track record is pretty incredible. It'll be interesting to see who he works with next. I wonder if it's a player who is currently maybe already thinking, or maybe this speeds up their own decision of parting ways with a coach when you see someone of that caliber who's on the market.
Yeah, I have one player in mind, and this is in the rumor mill, but it's by no means like a suggestion that this is actually happening. It's just a little ironic that a very similar timeline, Amanda Anisimova split with her coach, Rick Vleeschouwers, just a few days ago. And Anisimova is, of course, one of the best players in the world still, and she's top 5 in the world. And, of course, 2 Grand Slam finals last year. That felt like an incredibly amicable split, whether they were they decided they'd kind of set out what they intended to do, and Rick was moving on to other things. But that partnership has ended.
It's tough to figure out, right? Like, it's different than any other sport because you're one-on-one. You're not one of 15 players on a team or 20 players on a team. You're getting that full attention, that full scrutiny. You're always under the coach's microscope. He or she is just looking at you. And, I had Eric Heckman on, former coach of Serena and Venus Williams, just a matter of weeks ago. And he had just split with Haley Baptiste, who, by the way, is playing terrific tennis herself.
She is.
And really seems poised to move into the upper levels of the women's game right now, which is what he alluded to. And even though they had just parted ways and it felt like it was coming from her side a little bit, he was still so proud of what she had accomplished and what she's capable of doing. But he did mention to me that dynamic between coach and player is just such a fine line, such a delicate balance, especially when you're a coach like Eric Heckman and some of the other top coaches. They're not going to mince words. They're going to tell it to you straight up. And, maybe after a certain amount of time, you want to hear that from somebody else, I guess.
Yeah, and it's certainly possible that Wim's message at some point got stale for Iga. And I'll just say, from my perspective of watching her the past couple of tournaments, she felt like a player, firstly, playing with a lot of stress, and she looked a little bit tactically lost, almost between playing styles of how she wanted to play. It felt like, at least in the match with Svitolina, she couldn't really decide. Is she grinding and counterpunching? Is she being more aggressive? And she could not find the balance between the two. And that's something I think that she's, of course, going to have to figure out ASAP, right ahead of the clay court season. At the same time, it might be a positive that the clay is coming for her, because even her at kind of 50-60% level is going to probably chalk up a bunch of early wins on the clay.
Yeah, let's talk about another player who's coming into her own and hopefully going to be joining the conversation with the players we've just mentioned over the last 10-15 minutes. A player who Andy Roddick says will win a slam in the next 2 years. Bold prediction. And that is Canadian Victoria Mboko. What do you think of Roddick's comments, Ben? And what do you think of what we've seen from her through this first portion, this first quarter of the 2026 season?
Well, firstly, I'm so glad he made those comments and not us. It's not the Canadian podcast and it's not the Canadian pundits putting the pressure on Victoria Mboko. And I don't think it's Andy Roddick applying any pressure to her either. I think he's just, passing the eye test the way Mboko is playing. She looks like, she is a solidified top 10 player. She looks to me almost like a top 5 player, and she's getting progressively better every single given tournament. And she's beating pretty much everybody behind her. She's starting to beat players ahead of her. And I'm just so impressed by this progression, not just physically in her movement, her ball striking, but just mentally, her calm demeanor on court. There's never any panic. We, of course, remember seeing that in Montreal, where she would drop a number of opening sets and battle to the victory. And you think, okay, well, her composure is unbelievable. Maybe she's riding off the crowd, but for her to continue this so strongly, I think of this round of 16 match she played in Miami against Andreeva, which I was watching. She wins a tough first set, 7-6. it feels like maybe she's in control in the second set. I think she maybe had a break at one point. They're kind of jostling. It's about 4-all. Andreeva shifts things and grabs hold of the second set 6-4. It felt like a momentum change, and I spoke about this because I was watching actually with Coach Rob Steckley, our friend who's coached with a number of Canadian players and a number of players on tour. There are a lot of players who would falter in a second set like that and collapse in the third. She did the opposite. She was so unfazed. She just picked up right where she left off. She was the one who took over the match in the third set. She grabbed hold of the momentum. She won it 6-love. It was unbelievable. And Steckley kind of described it as like she doesn't care, as in she's not rattled by any of these things that happen within a match, to be able to reset and trust her tennis. For her to do that at this age is so important that, look, I definitely believe she is very close to already contending for Grand Slams.
Yeah, the composure is just so impressive already. And the evolution that we've seen even within this season is impressive to me, because if you think back to Adelaide, she loses the final pretty handily to her fellow teenage phenom, Mira Andreeva. And now she's beaten her twice in a row. And I think at the start of this year, as much hope and expectation we had for Vicky, and as much as she accomplished last year, I think we put Mira Andreeva in a higher classification based on she's been around a little bit longer and she's shown a little bit more consistency for a longer amount of time. But now that Vicky's beaten her twice in a row, she's showing how she's able to adapt and to beat a player that beat her, like I said, rather easily earlier in the year in a big pressure moment. So that bodes well. And the only other two players that have beaten Vicky Mboko this year are Aryna Sabalenka, the world number one, and Karolina Muchova, a player who you and I think have given big props to over the last couple of years, that without injuries, we would have seen her as a top 10 presence for a lot more consistent amount of time. So 2 losses each to those fantastic players. But otherwise, Vicky is handling players like Elena Rybakina, for example. And the big wins have really been piling up. It's not too much, I don't think, for Andy Roddick to say that she's going to win a slam in the next 2 years, because I feel it's quite possible too. Now we got to stay healthy, and you got to keep progressing and keep working hard and avoiding distractions, of course, all that. But she seems, like you said, so singularly focused on the task at hand, and she's got a great team around her as well. And, I think back a few years ago when tournament director Carl Hale of the National Bank Open said to me, "Oh yeah, Vicky's going to win this tournament within the next couple of years." And at the time, I kind of scoffed, because I thought, well, it's just the hometown tournament director who's trying to pump the Canadian crowd up here a little bit in terms of expectations. But clearly he was right, because look at what she did last summer in Montreal, and it wouldn't surprise me if Andy Roddick was on the money with his prediction as well. So it's going to be very interesting now to see the transition to clay. I spoke with Vicky today, actually. She says she's getting her wisdom teeth out tomorrow, but expects to be ready for the clay court season. And she's super excited to go and play on clay. And don't forget, she spent a couple of years training heavily in Europe and playing a lot of ITF tournaments on clay. And I expect, much like we've said with Felix Auger-Aliassime, this is a Canadian player who is comfortable on the surface that's coming up here.
Yeah. No, she's in such a fantastic place, as you said. And well, it's kind of unbelievable that so many of these tournaments are sort of just gravy for her in terms of collecting points. She did have a couple clay results last year, but oh boy, she can keep climbing up higher and higher. Couple more notes on the women's side. Qinwen Zheng, it's great to see her back and in form, former Australian Open finalist and former world number 4. Couple big wins, takes out Madison Keys in the round of 32 in Miami before losing to Aryna Sabalenka. She missed a big chunk of time with injury, and I'm guilty of it. Of much like anybody else, a player leaves the tour for a handful of months and you almost forget about them, and how much of a contender she was when she was a regular presence on tour. For sure. I think she can get back there. I mean, she won gold, as we remember, on the Roland Garros surface, so she likes the clay court season. She looks healthy and fit. She's still playing great from the back of the court. I think she could be kind of one of those wild card names in the clay court season to do some damage and maybe make a big run somewhere.
Absolutely. I feel she's only skimmed the surface. She was in the top 5 for such a short amount of time, unfortunately, really, when you think about it, because of injuries, and she was gone off the tour for so long. And as you mentioned, the tour waits for nobody. Like, it doesn't care that you're off injured. Things move along. Other players are eager to step up and take those points and take those opportunities. But she's back and she's super focused and she wants a lot and she's hungry for a lot. And she's not going to be content to be a 10, 15, 20th ranked player on the tour. She's going to want to be right back up there at the top. And so I'm excited to see what can happen. As you mentioned, she's got success on clay in big moments. No reason we can't be throwing her name in when we get to Roland Garros. And don't forget about the clay court season either. This is a long build-up. The clay court season goes on for what seems like ever. There's so many 1,000 level tournaments to get us to Paris that there's plenty of time for these players to find their footing. And hopefully they're all clicking by the time it gets to the French Open and we can just have some lights out tennis in Paris this year.
That's the hope. Another Canadian note, I mean, Gabrielle Dabrowski, we love talking about her partnership with Aaron Routliffe. We emotionally have to move on from that.
I'm not over it. Okay.
I say that because I know you're not over it. But look, the partnership, the reignition of her partnership with Louisa Stefani has been paying dividends. We know they picked up that title in Dubai. And I felt they played really well in Miami to get to the semifinals and push a couple of the very best players in doubles in the world to a super tiebreak. They lost in the semis to Townsend and Siniakova. So Dabrowski not skipping a beat with her new partner in Louisa Stefani, and I hope that continues through the clay court season. Maybe they can be contending for that French Open crown.
Well, I mean, she's going to have, the number 1 seed next to her, the number 2 seed next to her. She's going to be right up there in terms of having a good path to get to the later rounds without having to play some of the biggest other doubles tandems in the world. I hate those super tie breaks. I just hate them in doubles. I wish they would let them play it out because I think it leaves too much to chance. It's kind of like a shootout in hockey. No, I want to see overtime. I want to see a full overtime like in the playoffs, none of this 3-on-3 business like we just saw in the Olympics between Canada and the United States. I'm not over that either.
No, I'm not either. Why'd you bring that up?
Things that Mike is still not over, both on the men's and women's side of the Olympic hockey. But yeah, Gabby's terrific. No matter who you pair her up with, she's going to do great. Also made the finals in Indian Wells in mixed doubles which I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, we don't see mixed doubles typically outside of the majors. And I don't remember, has Indian Wells ever had mixed doubles before? Was this like a one-off or a trial thing or a new thing? I just don't remember seeing it in any 1,000 level tournaments before. I like it. I think it's a cool concept. I'd be down to see it in Canada, except obviously, as you and most of our viewers and listeners know, Toronto and Montreal are separate between the men and the women. There's no way you're going to get them going between those two cities to play some mixed dubs. But I do think it's cool if we see it pop up a little bit more, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I think it's a good selling of the doubles, especially at the venue itself, to pack stadiums when you mix the men and the women together. It's always really compelling. It was so compelling at the US Open, as we know, last year. So I'm all for it and would love to see more of it. Let's shift over.
Go ahead.
Before
we shift over here,
okay.
One last thing that just caught my mind because we were talking about doubles is how cool is it to see how in demand Victoria Mboko is to be partnered up with some of the best players in the world in doubles. I mean, she played with Mira Andreeva. They had to withdraw as things got more intense, I guess, on the single side of things. But she also didn't she play with Coco Gauff recently also?
Yeah, so she played with Andreeva at Indian Wells. Where did she play with Coco? In Doha, they played. Yeah.
So I just think it's so cool that these top level players and players who are contemporaries of her. I mean, Coco's not that much older, 2-3 years older than Vicky is. It's so cool to see that she's in demand. And look, often if you get a new young player emerge and start racking up wins, other more established players might feel threatened or not be open enough to want to get that close to them. But I think that speaks volumes to just Vicky's friendly demeanor and nature. The fact that these other players are wanting to bring her in and play alongside her, it really shows me there's a huge respect there for her. And I think that's pretty cool for a 19-year-old on the WTA.
Undoubtedly. We love her personality from all the times she's shared her time on this podcast. So it's great to see. Let's talk men's tennis. It's pretty rare that, I mean, the Sunshine Double is rare enough, but to see it happen on both the men's and the women's side in the same year is particularly special. And look, going into Indian Wells, all the talk of the town was Carlos Alcaraz and holding an undefeated season at the time. And could he keep that going and collect a title there? And I think Jannik Sinner has very quickly reminded us of his absolute greatness, particularly on a hard court surface. But greatness overall, collecting the Sunshine Double, winning in Miami, dominant performance in a rain-delayed final over Yuri Lehechka, surprise finalist, 6-4, 6-4. I mean, the most impressive of this feat, winning Indian Wells and Miami back-to-back, which is already so tough to do. He did not drop a single set over these two tournaments. The first player ever to do that. That's
badass. That's really badass, right? To be able to do that so consistently, so damn good for basically 4 weeks straight.
Yep.
In two tournaments with different conditions in terms of how the courts play. They're not mirror tournaments. They're not exactly the same. Balls, bounces, just the conditions in Miami with that weird sort of stadium within a stadium set up there in the football stadium that they have.
Yep.
Yeah, super impressive. He had no points to defend. So this is narrowing the gap between him and Alcaraz. He's now only just a tad over 1,000 points behind Alcaraz. So that number one is certainly up for grabs as this season continues to roll on, because he wasn't playing this portion of last season. And
right.
So here he goes. I sure love that he beat Zverev in both semifinals in Indian Wells and Miami. And I'm sorry if you want to call me a hater, but I'm never going to change my tune on that player. And more seriously, it just shows the gap between the top two and others, right? With Zverev, I think, slotted in the number 3 position right now. I know Djokovic did beat Sinner in Australia, which was terrific, but it just seems like Alcaraz and Sinner, compared to everybody else out there, will give Djokovic a bit of a special, privilege regardless of his ranking. But everybody else, they ain't close. They're just not close.
Yeah, and look, Novak Djokovic pulled out of Miami, which really wasn't surprising to me at all, whatsoever. I would have been surprised if he had played both, got in Indian Wells and then moved on. Is it I don't want to say problem. I mean, the ATP side, Carlos Alcaraz loses early to Sebastian Korda in 3 sets, and what a great win for the American, a super high-end talent who I feel has maybe kind of underperformed the type of expectations that we probably had for him early in his career. Such a great striker of the ball.
Yeah, let's talk about that for sure.
Yeah, like that was a big time win from Korda. But for Alcaraz, I think Daniil Medvedev played a fantastic match in Indian Wells to beat him in the semis, and Carlos admitted that.
And nice to have Medvedev sort of back, after an off 2025. I just love him. I love his game. I love his funky forehand. I love his humor. I love his analysis. I mean, we've had him on Matchpoint Canada before, and albeit a short interview, he gave us so much in those, 7 or 8 minutes. Didn't you feel like in that interview, he was just so dialed in and he got so into the questions? He's just got like a mind for tennis, you can tell. So I'm very happy to see him kind of back in the mix of things. And I think he's still at an age where he's got a lot to present. But yeah, Sebastian Korda, fantastic to see him remind us of what he's capable of. And I mean, I guess I just said that Sinner and Alcaraz were almost untouchable, so I can eat it on that one. But
well, I don't think you're wrong though. Like the untouchable thing is, I feel like after Alcaraz lost, it felt to me like this is a foregone conclusion. Jannik Sinner is going to win this tournament. That was my thought. After Korda pulled off that upset over Alcaraz, you feel like one of them is out. Who is going to stop Jannik Sinner?
And is Alcaraz perhaps already putting way more merit on the Grand Slams at this stage, even early in his career, prioritizing and placing more emphasis than on these Masters 1000 events? Because let's be honest, the majors are the most important, the most points, the most money, the most prestige.
Yep.
And him and Sinner have totally owned those for the last 2+ years. So there's that.
Absolutely. No, of course.
And Korda, 6'5". I forgot how friggin' tall he is. He's a
big
tall
guy.
dude.
He
And
is.
son, of course, of 1998 Aussie Open winner Peter Korda, who, by the way, denied Marcelo Rios his best chance at a Grand Slam at that tournament, beating him in straight sets. Korda had that interest. I don't know if you remember, because he's a little bit before, I feel like, your time, but he had the scissor kick celebratory move where he
I heard about
jump
this,
in the
yeah.
air and do that. It's super awkward. You should go check it out. Anyone who hasn't seen it before on YouTube, it's really worth looking at. But what a family of athletes, because both of Sebastian Korda's sisters are professional golfers.
Yeah.
Mom was also, I forget, either a professional golfer or tennis player, and dad won a major tennis title as well. Sebi Korda, career high 15th in the world in 2024, and I think we expected that he would sort of be up there, but things have fluctuated. 3 titles, 7 other finals, mostly hard court results getting him deep into those tournaments. 1 slam quarterfinal going back to the Aussie Open in 2023. He said that a conversation with John McEnroe really kind of inspired him with some confidence ahead of that match, that victory over Alcaraz. Of course, then he goes out and loses to a player that many might say, well, hey, who's this guy? I'll let you pronounce the name for us.
Martin Landalucci.
Thank you.
Who came through qualifying.
And former junior #1, like I shouldn't say like a kid who's got no talent, but a 20-year-old who is still certainly rising up to a career high. He's still outside the top 100, but just interesting that you beat the world, number 1 player, and then you lose to a qualifier and someone that you wouldn't expect maybe to lose to. But nonetheless, hopefully that convo from Johnny Mac resonates with him and can propel him to play some more, because he seems like a super nice dude. And I think he's just another player in a long line of Americans that you got to keep an eye on, because they've got such depth.
Yeah, completely agree. I will say, beyond Jiri Lehecka, great for him to show up in a Masters 1000 final. I mean, I'll admit, not necessarily a guy on my radar going into Miami whatsoever. He's always been pretty solid, kind of in
would have been in our sort of second echelon players to maybe like a dark horse to make it to the quarters or something, right?
Sure, for sure. And he's normally in that kind of like 20 to 25 range, like a solid guy who you'll see him in the 4th round of a slam, but he has not had a breakthrough like this. In fact, memorably, the other year in Madrid, he got to the semifinals where he was playing Felix Auger-Aliassime, and his back completely gave out 3 games into their match, and he was out for months after that. Like a horrible back injury, and Felix went into that finals in Madrid, kind of an unusual one where he had a couple retirements and Jannik Sinner getting sick, and then Jiri Lehecka throwing out his back in their semi, and suddenly he's playing for a Masters 1000 title. But it's great to see Jiri Lehecka have this breakthrough. Arthur Fils, I'm also just keeping an eye on. If you look at his trajectory now that he's over a back injury and playing healthy and fit again, he beat Stefanos Tsitsipas here 11-2 in about 50 minutes early in this tournament. Now, I know Tsitsipas...
Well, okay, Stefanos Tsitsipas. I mean, look, didn't Goran Ivanisevic just throw him under the bus again?
Oh, my God,
week,
he
right?
did.
So,
he did. And I feel bad. Look, Tsitsipas is just clinging to this top 50 ranking now. I think he's 49, which is... Wow. We're so used to being...
You wouldn't have expected that, that's for sure.
No, it's a major fall from grace, but Arthur Fils is coming up the rankings strong, and now he's within the top 30, and I think he'll be top 15 by the end of the year, if not higher.
No, he's one of my favorite up-and-coming players, and we've been talking about him a lot over the last year. I just love watching his game, the dynamics of his game. I love French tennis players, always have, both on the men's and women's side. France had such a nucleus of solid players on the men's side for years, with Monfils and Tsonga and Gilles Simon, among others. And on the women's side, of course, Caroline Garcia, who I believe just announced she's pregnant with her first child. So that's pretty exciting, too, for the recently retired Caroline Garcia. But you always like French players. I don't know, maybe it's because Canada's a bilingual nation, and we got a lot of great French-Canadian tennis journalists and players, of course, too, but always had an affinity for them. And I think Arthur Fils is the next one that I'm super stoked to follow his career trajectory.
As we get into the clay, one topic crossed my mind. It's not on our prep sheet, but
why do you got to do this to me, eh?
just a thought. Jannik Sinner, who's about 1,100 points back of Carlos Alcaraz for the world #1 ranking. Alcaraz, this clay court swing will have to defend a Masters 1000 in Monte Carlo. He'll have to defend a Masters 1000 in Rome. He'll have to defend a Barcelona title worth 500 points. Yep. And he'll have to defend a French Open crown. That is 4,500 points. That is
Your
a
math
lot.
Is better than mine, but that is a heck of a lot to defend.
That is a lot of points to defend. Is there a window really opening here for Jannik Sinner to potentially reclaim this number one ranking by the end of the clay court swing if things don't go to par for Carlos?
Yeah, certainly. So throw that storyline in there as another interesting one to track as we build up the hype on Matchpoint Canada for the next slam of the year. Less pressure, you would say, for Sinner. Let's see how Alcaraz handles it. You know, is he tiring out a little bit after the early hard court portion of the season? It would be understandable to think that he might. So it just adds another dynamic, and it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, look, Rafa Nadal's not there anymore to win all these events. So it's, we're still in somewhat uncharted territory because we're so used to seeing the King of Clay do his thing on this surface.
Yeah.
Carlitos, super talented as well. Another Spaniard that is going to be contending for years to come on this surface, on all surfaces, clearly. But yeah, let's see what happens. I'm excited to see these two go toe-to-toe. I hope we get at least a couple of finals leading up to the French to really elevate that then. And wouldn't it be cool if the number one ranking was legit on the line, realistically on the line, if it narrows even further between now and that point in time?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk on Felix Auger-Aliassime, who we mentioned Arthur Fils. I mean, Felix had a tough loss to him at Indian Wells, particularly tough because in their second set tiebreak, Felix, I believe, had 5 set points. Fils rallied to win 6-3, 7-6. And then in Miami, you felt like with that upset to Carlos Alcaraz, other seeds falling early like Medvedev, the door was opening for a potential run for Felix, maybe. And he goes out and loses to Frenchman Terence Atman, which is just kind of another one of these sort of head-scratching losses against a player who, is now inside the top 50, but someone you'd like to see Felix take care of and book his place in the round of 16 and keep going. So a bit of a step back maybe from the performance in Miami for Felix.
Absolutely. And look, could we just put some of these clay court tournaments indoors? Because, we know how much he loves indoor tennis. If we just put a roof over some of these places, maybe that would give him a little added probability of going deep. But look, both these tournaments have been somewhat lackluster for Felix in recent years, and I think we get super excited because he starts the year having some success. He's played well in the Middle Eastern swing. Rotterdam, he's played well there too, but career, he's almost just at 500 for Indian Wells, 9 wins, 8 losses, quarterfinals once. Miami, slightly better, 10-7 record. He did make the semis, but that was way back in 2019, which is crazy to think that 7 years ago he was having that kind of success already, which is why we have such high expectations for him. He's also in the top 10, so you'd love to see that consistency too. But again, to go back to it, aside from Sinner and Alcaraz, who is giving us consistent tennis 12 months of the year? And there really isn't anybody. So, you might say Zverev, but not at the majors. So, back to work for Felix. He's going to get back to work. He's not going to dwell on it. He's not going to get down on himself. I saw a video where he was thinking back to his, 2022 loss at Roland Garros to Nadal and just how close he came in that match. And he was getting goosebumps as he was watching this video of him and the highlights from that match. So, he's excited for what's next and he's always looking forward. And I'm going to try and keep that same mentality too, because at the end of the day, we got a Canadian in the top 10 on the men's side, on the women's side, and there are a lot of countries out there that sure can't say that.
That's a great point. Gabriel Diallo did win one match in Miami before losing to Ugo Humbert. He is one of those Canadians actually kicking off his clay court campaign this week, and he is the number 1 seed actually in Bucharest, smaller tournament. So he'll be the number 1 seed there. I don't know if that makes him the favorite. Clay is not his best surface, but we'll see what happens there as he kicks off the tournament against Alex Molcan. Just finishing up on some other Canadian news. I mean, we have Billie Jean King Cup tie upcoming for the Canadian women, April 10th
in Kazakhstan.
Astana, Kazakhstan, and
We will not be there live. Yep, sad to say.
we can't make it this time.
No.
Also, Victoria Mboko cannot make it, and I mean, you spoke to her; she's getting the wisdom teeth out. I don't think they're going to need her, and Marina Stakusic is not making it. This creates the opportunity for a former Grand Slam champion, I think, to carry the torch here for Canada, Bianca Andreescu, who's going to be representing the squad. And I'd love to see her step up and get a couple singles wins for the team.
Yeah, look, we talked about this, you and I, before we hit record on this episode, and just how happy we were to see her in a prominent position, right? Back in the driver's seat. For how long was she the number one singles player for Canada? And when healthy, she was counted on in these Billie Jean King Cup ties. And here she is getting to be the number one. And I think a great opportunity for her. She's been playing healthy, knock on wood. She looks like she's gaining her mojo back. As we're speaking right now, she won her first match in Charleston on the Hard True Clay in the U.S., and so I think this is wonderful for her to hopefully get that confidence back and not have to play second fiddle to Vicky or to Leilani Fernandez, that she can go. And I think this confidence of being, the number one singles player for our squad should bode well for her. And look, if she stays healthy, that ranking's going to be back in the top 50 for sure this season. And I really, truly feel like she's got a lot still to offer. She's young enough, she's strong enough, she's resilient enough, and she's got the game that can piss a lot of players off, let's be honest, right?
Without a doubt. And Aryna Arsenault also added to the roster. She's a good option for doubles. Kayla Cross will be there too, and Gabriela Dabrowski, so they're still sending a quality team. That's all from us for Matchpoint Canada. I'm excited for our next episode. First, with that interview.
Yes.
Before we get to the clay court stuff, guys, keep your eyes open for Mike's fantastic interview with
can I
former
just
Australian Open finalist. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, can I just say, we've been trying to get Dami on this podcast for a heck of a long time.
I know.
I made contact a long time ago, and I forget if the initial contact came via Rob Steckley or if I just reached out through back channels of my own, but it's been a long time, and she's just so darn busy. I mean, she's got 2 kids under the age of 5. She's got her own tennis academy that we'll talk about. She's got a lot of side interests and projects and fitness things that she's doing. So I was just really thrilled that all of a sudden it came together quite quickly. And in fact, the interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. Slovakian time, and I was getting my kids ready for school the other day, and all of a sudden I get the little update on my phone that Dominika Sibylkova has entered the Zoom chat an hour earlier than expected because I screwed up the time difference. And so I had tell my kids to go feed themselves and get ready for school on their own and do the interview with, my cats were running around. Anyways, it went great, and it's nearly a half hour. And for anyone who is a big fan of the 5'3" Slovakian player, I think you'll really enjoy it. So tune into that. I'm excited to share it next week with our listeners and our viewers. I just want to say before you wrap, thanks again to 10XTO for hosting me for this episode. Thanks for Recovery for being such a terrific sponsor of ours here in Toronto as well. Don't forget the code MatchpointCan if you're in the greater Toronto area to go and get $10 off your first session there. You won't regret it. And Ben, I'm looking forward to the clay court swing here on Matchpoint Canada with you. So lots of good things ahead here, man.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. Glad we caught up. To recap Miami and the Sunshine Double, guys who've been listening to watching Matchpoint Canada, hit the subscribe button below if you're watching on YouTube. We will talk to you next time. Thank you guys so much for watching us at Matchpoint Canada. If you like our work, follow along, hit the subscribe button below.